Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell. Y'all, guess what today is? Today is the 1-year anniversary for the Roundup Podcast. I cannot believe it's already been 1 year, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being a listener. This has really been awesome. This is our 25th episode. I hope that these have been good for you. I hope that they have added value to you, and we want to continue to do that, add value to you, providing relevant content to your ministry. And so in order to celebrate this, here's what we're doing. We're doing a giveaway. So we're going to give away 4 books. We're going to give away Master Plan of Evangelism. We're going to give away Defining Decade. We're giving away Gaining by Losing. And then we're giving away Movements That Change the World. And so I want to give those to you guys. So we have a giveaway. We're doing that on Instagram. And here are the rules. So rule number 1, follow at SBTC Collegiate. Number 2, we have a post out on our Instagram right now. Go to that post and comment on that and share your favorite Roundup Podcast episode, and then tag 2 of your friends that are leaders in a collegiate ministry. So they could be a pastor, a minister, a lay leader, it could be a student leader, whatever. Just your favorite podcast episode and 2 friends that are leaders in a college ministry, and then share that post, the giveaway post, in your stories or your feed as a post and tag at SBTC Collegiate. And so we're going to run this giveaway through November 6th, and then the following week we will announce our winner and give that away. So again, giveaway, 4 books, follow at SBTC Collegiate, post a comment sharing your favorite episode on our giveaway post, tag 2 friends that are leaders in a collegiate ministry, share that post on your story or in your feed, and tag at SBTC Collegiate so we can make sure and track that. And we're going to run that through Friday. So join in on that giveaway, spread the word, and we'd love to give those books away to somebody. So also, we want to continue to make these podcasts better. And so we have a survey in our bio. If you get a chance, go in there, click that. So it'll take you just a few minutes as we take a survey to look to how we can better develop content for you in the future. So do that as well. So we got a great podcast today on our 25th episode about the Well Church with Allen Tate, who's the lead pastor of the Well Church Network in Alabama. Allen was a college pastor at a church. He cast this vision to his pastor that, hey, we could plant multiple churches around the state, reaching students. He bought into it, and it's an incredible story that you do not want to miss. And so check out this episode with me and Allen Tate.
You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell. I'm super excited about today's episode. I have on with me Allen Tate. Allen is the lead pastor of the Well Church in Alabama, and he's actually got a network of churches which we want to talk to him about today. Now, Allen, you are in, is it Florence, Alabama?
Yeah, that's correct, man.
All right.
I appreciate you having me on today.
Man, glad to have you. So I ran into Allen several years ago in an event that I'm sure Brian Fry put on, probably Hitchhikers, what I imagine what that event probably was. But really, we're kind of kindred spirits. Allen, you are an INTJ, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
man.
I'm an INTJ. Are you an Enneagram 1?
No, I'm a 5, actually.
You're a 5, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I can see that. You know what? I've met some other INTJs that were 5 as well. So if you're not familiar with INTJ, it's Myers-Briggs. You can go look it up. Anyway, so I felt like I had a kindred spirit in Allen. We kind of think a little bit similar, and he loves barbecue. So there's not many people I know who are INTJs, love collegiate church planting and barbecue. So there's just a bond there that, that I think is pretty unique. So
that's it, man. Got smoke in my blood. I love it. I'm
dude,
about it. If we just want to take the conversation that way, I'm prepared to do that as well.
Well, I planned on the conversation going that way, knowing that you and I may be the only ones interested in it, so we don't need to stay there too long. But I definitely want to hit on it. Hey, I'd love to know a little bit, because I know that you love to smoke meats. You even sent me, what was that? Was that 4th of July? You guys actually built a cinder block pit, right?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. We built a pit. My dad, I feel like, to use church terms, my dad discipled me in smoking meat. That's
Yeah.
something that he passed down, and just something that I've always done with him. And 4th of July, we smoked a whole pig in a cinder block pit, and had way more meat than people to eat it. And so we've still been eating on it, for a couple months. So it got us through the rest of quarantine at least. So,
That's awesome.
so yeah, man, that is, I feel like that's God's good grace in my life. Just standing out by a grill after a long, hard day of ministry and church planting, and asking and trying to answer questions that are bigger than us, bigger than me. I feel like God's grace in my life is just letting me sit, and just relax and know that I'm going to start this process and end this process, and it's going to be good and good for me,
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I love it. It's part of what, I guess, part of just the way that God's wired me and raised me up with my dad as well. So.
Oh man, that's awesome. So similar story myself. My dad did competition cooking for a long time, and so I just kind of learned from him. We ended up opening a barbecue restaurant for about 8 years, and God called me to ministry, and so I had to step out of that. But still, I did not like the hours of a restaurant, but I love just smoking meats. Like, I'm like you. There's something about, because there's in a smoking meats. It's kind of an art. It's
Yep.
Everyone kind of has their own way, but in some ways, ministry is a job that's never finished.
Right.
But smoking meat can be, and it can be fun and introspective, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Well, man, and I love it so much that I am coming to your state next month just to eat barbecue. Like, my wife and I are coming out just to go on a barbecue tour. So
I love it, man. That'll be awesome. What's funny is, so me and my wife were supposed to go down to Austin a couple of weeks ago, which right now we're shooting this on the 5th of October. This will come out in a couple of months, but our little boy, William, got sick for the very first time, so we had to cancel it. So, yeah, we were going to go down there and eat some barbecue, but didn't work out. No worries. We'll, Austin's not going anywhere. We'll go check it out again soon.
Absolutely.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, Allen, all right, so you love barbecue. You're from Alabama. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of how you got to where you're at today, man.
Yeah. So married to Julie. We've been married for going on 14 years. We got a 9-year-old daughter named Adley Ruth. We got a 6-year-old son named Jude, and a 2-year-old daughter named Abigail, and she rules the roost. So she's in charge, and she lets everybody know. We've been in Florence for 10 years, but prior to that, Julie and I met at Auburn. We're both Auburn grads, and so I feel like if you're from Alabama, college football's in your blood, and your team is your school, unless you went to the University of Alabama, and then it's just because you were born in Alabama. That's who you pull for.
Yeah.
But I made the switch in 5th grade, man. I got out of it. So made the switch to Auburn, and the Lord led me there, led me to Julie. And man, so we've been at this thing really since we got married. 2 weeks after we got married, we were in ministry together. And so she's my right hand in a lot of ways. And so, that's the short of who I am and kind of how we got here, or at least how God brought us together to this point.
Gotcha. Hey, so I'm on Google Maps right now, and I'm looking at Auburn on the maps, and I see there's actually a Hickory Dickory Park in Auburn. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I just thought that was kind of random.
Yeah, it's like a little kids area, like a little playground.
Nice. Well, cool, man. So now you're with the Well Church. Tell us a little bit, because I know that you started out as the college pastor. Is it at Highlands Baptist Church?
Yeah.
Okay. And
yes.
Just share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So to kind of fill in a few gaps, because actually Hickory Dickory Park plays into it. To be
okay.
randomly.
Yeah.
So Julie and I met, like I said, at Auburn. I met a guy a couple of years earlier than that, at a pretty significant point in my life. I was struggling with a call to ministry, and finally got to a place where I realized that if I kept running from that call, I was going to be miserable. Mm-hmm. And so my senior year of high school, going into college, I finally decided, you know what, Lord, I'm going to do this, but I want you to know you're ruining my plans, and I want you to know that I'm going to be terrible at it. And when I when I prove to you that I'm terrible at it, you're going to let me then go do what I feel like you're really have cut me out to do. Ministry
awesome.
scared me to death, man. And I think a lot of it because, I didn't really know who I was,
Uh-huh.
if that makes sense,
Yep.
how God had specifically wired me. I'm just seeing senior pastors. And I'm like, I'm not that gregarious personality. Like I'm not an E
Yep.
on the Myers-Briggs, it's not me. So I immediately, just struggled to see myself in those positions. And the Lord had a plan. And so I go into college, and second day of college, I meet a guy named Daniel Berry at the BCM at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those moments where if you remove that moment from my life, I'm not real sure what the rest of my life looks like from that moment at 18 to where I am now. The Lord had saved me back when I was 10 and had done some significant discipleship in my life through other people in high school specifically, but he rocked my world in college with this guy, with Daniel. And Daniel spent the next 3 years just investing in me, investing on a level that no one had ever really invested before, just life on life, just giving his life away to me in discipling me. And my senior year, he took a job at the University of Kentucky. And Julie and I were dating at that point in time, and trying to figure out what's next, and assuming, all right, we're just going to go off to seminary and figure things out from there. And Daniel came back into town, and we met actually at Hickory Dickory Park. And he let his kids swing, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm going to have this internship available. I know you're still wrestling with what ministry looks like, but I'd love for you to think about coming up to Kentucky for a year and just interning and just seeing if God has collegiate work in your future."
Yeah.
And it was more of a plan than we currently had. And so we're like, all right. So we got engaged and then got married post grad. And then, like I said, 2 weeks later, moved to Kentucky and started what we thought was just a year up there. And about 3 months into that first semester, the Lord just solidified in my heart. He's like, hey, that ministry call you surrendered to just 4.5 years ago, this is what it's for. And he just ate me up with a love and a heart for collegiate work. And I think in a way that I could see it at that point, because I was then outside of it. I wasn't a college student in it, being affected by it. I was now helping to affect the lives of other college students. And man, he just did something in that only he could do in opening my eyes to that truth. And it's really one of the first times I remember being really excited about that call, that ministry call. Personally, just internally, I was never really openly against it in my conversations when I'd share that that's what I was going to do. But internally, there was always that, like, man, I just don't know. I just don't know if I'm going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord rocked my world, like I said, that semester. And that 1 year turned into 2 more years where I stepped into an associate role at the University of Kentucky BCM. And the Lord just continued to show me how he'd called and cut me out. Little things, the Enneagram wasn't really that big, and I really wasn't even aware of Myers-Briggs at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But I remember at an intern retreat, they made us do a DISC assessment.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first times in my life that I went, oh, it's okay to be me. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have to try and tire myself out being somebody else in leadership. I can lead as an SI, mm-hmm. and on the DISC, it's, so God did a ton in that 3 years of just helping me build competency and build more clarity and conviction in my calling, above all else. And that third year, I got a message on Facebook from a friend that I went to high school with, who was here in Florence, Alabama. And she said, hey, look, my husband has been doing part-time college ministry at this church. And, it's had long-standing presence here for about 10 years and has seen some better days, but the church is looking to hire its first full-time college minister and was wondering if you would be interested in it. And truthfully, we thought we had another year in Kentucky before we moved. I was in seminary, so I'm like, I got 1 more year I need to finish before I go anywhere else. But we'll talk, we'll at least listen. And so Julie and I came down to Florence and interviewed with John Brock, the pastor of Highland Baptist, and spent a lot of time with their team and talking about the ministry, talking about what it was at the time and where they wanted to see it go. And was a lot of really good things going on, and it just needed some leadership and some full-time leadership. And the problem was that I felt like I wasn't ready to step into that role yet, because I was leading in Kentucky, but under this safety umbrella or with a safety net, which was Daniel. He was the guy. Mm-hmm. And without his encouragement, and frankly the encouragement of my wife, we would not be here now, because I would have stayed in Kentucky as long as he let me stay there, just because it was safe. It was a safe ministry environment. And they offered me the job, and I actually turned it down for those reasons. I'm like, I just don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm competent enough to do this yet.
Yeah.
And about a week later, my wife, who's much more in tune with the Spirit than I am many days, leaned over in bed. She said, "Hey, have you been able to stop thinking about Kentucky?" And I said, "No." And she said, "No, excuse me, have you been able to stop thinking about Florence?" I said, "No." Yeah. She said, "Do you think you ought to call them back?" And I'm like, "Yes, probably. I probably should." Yeah. And so at that point, I called back, and we restarted the process, and we moved down here in the fall of I guess in the summer of 2010.
Okay.
And so yeah, we originally were hired on as just the college pastors of Highland Baptist, taking on about a 10-year-old college ministry that ministered to the University of North Alabama, which was about 7,500 students at the time. Mm-hmm. And the primary ministry that the well was doing at the time was just a Tuesday night worship service, which in its heyday was running in the 200s and 300s, but had kind of dwindled back down to less than 100. And so we spent the next couple of years just building and rounding out that ministry. And frankly, saw a lot of really, really, really good things happen in those first couple of years. But it was just the tip of the iceberg to where the Lord was ultimately taking us in Highland in the process.
I want to touch on something for just a second, because the way that you're personally wired, and the way that you look at what a pastor should be, you're like, man, I don't have all this charisma. I don't have like all this stuff. You're, more probably introspective and strategically minded, and I think that's a common misconception, because as you were sharing that, I mean, that was me, that is me to a T, of like feeling, wrestling with that call, because I don't feel like I'm wired the way my understanding of what ministry should look like, or a ministry leader should look like. So as you find yourself in 2010 kind of getting into this role as a college pastor, can you kind of share a little bit about how you grew into understanding your personal wiring and how you lead in your own kind of unique way?
Yeah, so I think there was a ton of unconscious competence there. Yeah. So that Enneagram 5 deal, right? It's helped give some language to some of this in my life. Mm-hmm. in regards to that core value of competency. Yep. was the reason I was so concerned and so worried in 10. So I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like I was ready. And I think what Daniel was able to see in me, and his just ability to say, hey, look, you are ready for this, whether you recognize it or not. Him sending me out and giving me just that boost of confidence to take the leap revealed a lot of unconscious competence that I had. Mm-hmm. Because when I got here, there weren't a lot of questions in regards to small groups and the things that we would normally do in ministry to be healthy. There weren't a lot of those things that I didn't necessarily have answers for immediately, because I had seen it and I had led it and I'd done it. I just didn't know that I was ready to take that step, Mm-hmm. And so, I think the other thing is you and I both know that competence is built over time through mistakes and through learning along the way. And I mean, the first time that I preached 2 weeks in a row was the first 2 weeks I was here. And it's like, all right. And I think I preached like 15 or 16 straight Tuesday nights. I'm like, okay, I've made a lot of mistakes here in my planning and prep, but I've learned a lot of things this semester and I'll be better next semester. And so I think the key there was I had a great staff backing, a great pastor that believed in me and knew I was not a finished product. I mean, he knew I was a really green minister in that sense, but trusted me to do the job because of what he had seen and what he had heard to that point. and trusted I was going to continue to grow into the other areas that I was not that competent in immediately. And so I think the key there was that I knew that he trusted me and he was going to back me even if I failed along the way. That I think I felt like I had freedom to dream a little bit, even if I didn't really know what that meant at that time.
Man, what a gift to have a pastor like that. Man, I wish everyone had had a pastor like that.
Absolutely.
You know, I've gotten to meet John, and what a sweet guy and fun guy to be around.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so tell us now, so you get there in 2010. Obviously now you guys have built out the Well Church Network, which includes 2 established churches, one that's getting off the ground right now, you know, even kind of in the midst of COVID. And so how did you get from 2010 green college pastor, never preached 2 weeks in a row, to, 10 years later, planting multiple churches? Like, how did that go down? How did you get that vision? How did you communicate that to your church, to John, and how did all that come about?
Yeah. So in 2014, it was kind of a major marker in my head, because we're like, all right, this is our first group of freshmen to seniors that kind of have come through our ministry. And so we get an idea or an opportunity here to really look at what we're producing, and we saw them out, and keep in mind, outside looking in, we're thinking, hey man, we're doing great. People are coming, they're coming to our stuff. We've got some areas we're still working on, but numbers are good, just kind of met those type of metrics. And in 2014, we began to look at what we're producing. That student that's graduating out, what are they doing? How are we preparing them for this next stage, this next step beyond college? And just to be honest, man, it was a gut wrenching, kind of a gut punch moment for us, or for me, as I'm looking at that, because we're seeing students graduate out and really not knowing what to do with their life, beyond college. Because the way I learned to articulate it is that we taught them to love our ministry, but we didn't teach them to love the church. And, we saw a lot of students coming on Tuesday nights, and we saw very few engaging with the body on Sunday morning, and so when they graduate, they go, okay, the Well's not for me anymore. This discipleship, this investment, this engagement that's good is no longer for me. I got to figure it out and find out some other place to do it. And we saw a lot of them just floating out there or marginally connected somewhere. And the thing about Florence is there's not a lot of jobs here. And so that most of them are moving out of town. So it's not even like they're connecting locally. They're moving to Huntsville or Birmingham or Nashville, some larger cities to get work, and just really struggling. And so in that fall of 14, I'm looking and going, Lord, what do you want us to do? What you want us to shut this thing down? Like, cause this is not good. You want us to rebuild it? You want us to start all over? Literally everything was on the table in those days. And I didn't really talk to a lot of people about it because I'm struggling just internally, with, I don't have the answer for what's next. And I don't even really know the question. I just know that this isn't good. What's happening right now.
Yeah.
Even though on the surface, everybody else probably thinks this is awesome.
Yeah.
I know that we've got issues.
Yeah.
About 6 months prior to that, our church engaged in something. Highland engaged in a replant of a church that was about to die across town. And so that's an important piece of the puzzle, because it changed the heart of our 90-year-old congregation at that point in time, to really more of an external. We're looking out, we're engaging the community, we're doing this together. And really it was a revitalization, a replant of that church, but it also was of the missional heartbeat of Highland. And so we joke a lot that Highland kind of backed into a multi-site, mindset or mentality as a church. We didn't set out to be multi-site, but certainly it became that with this replant. And so I began to think, 6 months down the road, hey, that was so big. What does it look like for us to launch our college ministry out that way? And just kind of start to create an environment that not only is for college, but can also extend beyond that so that those that stick, we can plug them in deeper. And this Tuesday night deal, becomes a Sunday morning deal where we can start to actually engage with conversations, deeper conversations about what it means to love the church, and not just your college ministry, and just try to get healthy, just try to answer some of those questions that I couldn't answer with our current setup.
Yeah.
And, I pitched that to John, and John and I in those 4 years had built a lot of trust, and I sent it to him in a text message, and I don't let him live this down to this day. He just simply responded, no. That's all he gave me. Just a no, just a flat no. And so I'm like, hey, I think that there's something here. I think that we can maybe not only do work here in Florence, but also do work elsewhere if we start to dream a little bit bigger with what we call college ministry. Mm-hmm. And at that point, John was wide open to the conversation. He's like, hey, if you think that there's something here, I'm willing to listen, mm-hmm. which is what I so appreciate about him, that he's not so stuck on this is the way we've got to do this forever. Yeah. That even if it meant, hey, I'm going to exchange these college students in our Sunday morning service for the sake of, hundreds in places that we don't even, we're not currently engaging. Yeah. And so yeah, man. And that was around, I guess, the start of the spring semester in 2015 when I sent him that message, and we began the process of like wrestling with what does that even look like? Because mm-hmm. collegiate church planting was not on our radar. I mean, I didn't even know the term in 2015, Yeah. Didn't know that anybody anywhere else was even remotely thinking along these lines. And so just trying to figure out, all right, what does this even mean, Lord? Like, mm-hmm. if you're giving us this vision, not just here in Florence, but also in Huntsville, a neighboring city, about 65 miles away, that has similar sized campus and very little engagement from local congregations, or some engagement, but not enough for the sake of really engaging the campus. We go, all right, Lord, what does that even mean? Like, we had no mold for this thing. And I'd met Brian Fry earlier through some DC Net connections, and I saw him at the National Collegiate Summit that Lifeway put on that spring in May. And I pulled him aside. I said, Brian, listen, my pastor and I have been talking about this. Nobody knows this. We're not dead set on this, but this is what we think the Lord's calling us to. And I need you to tell us that we're crazy so that we don't do it, mm-hmm. right? Like, we don't completely radically alter the way we're doing collegiate work. And Brian in that moment said, you're not crazy. I need to introduce you to some people.
So classic Brian.
So that's right. That's it. So he did the Brian Fry thing, is he introduced us to our friends at Resonate, and then got out of the way, Yeah. And that summer, man, we engaged in some video calls with the folks at Resonate, 4 or 5 of them, where they just shared their vision. They shared what they did. They shared their heart, and this 21 by 21 vision that was really fairly new in their world, and they're trying to figure it out. And we're like, yeah, you guys are 4 or 5 steps ahead of us, but that tension you felt in the beginning is the same tension we're feeling right now. And you guys have already answered some of these questions. And so really, I tell Keith, quite often, anytime I get the opportunity that they gave us the guts to jump, that their obedience gave us the guts to be obedient. Mm. And that I think the fruit of church planting in Alabama that we've done to this point, I think grows on a branch of their tree. It's significant what they did in our world. And so in the fall of 2015, we said, all right, we're going to do it. And so we planted the Well Church in Florence out in the fall of 2015. Still under the umbrella of Highland at that time, just because we don't know how this thing's going to go, and we don't know how many people are even going to stay. And, mm-hmm. Of these college students that are here. And thankfully the majority did and started and moved with us in this new vision for what this would be. And not just in Florence, but elsewhere too. And we had big plans that we would do it again in Huntsville, probably in 3 to 4 years, like, hey, get us down the road a little bit, let us figure some things out, and then we'll plan in Huntsville. Mm-hmm. But the Lord radically altered that timeline. And within 8 months, we were laying some groundwork in Huntsville to plant there, and ended up planting there in the fall of 2017. So just mm-hmm. 2 years later.
Man. All right. So how do you get from, so you send John the text, he's like, no, not doing that. And then you kind of talk him into it. You meet some community of people around it. And now as you're planting, what does this look like for you to plant out in Florence, still connected to home church? What did that look like for you guys? Did you do the same thing, but rebrand it, or how did that look?
Yeah, so we rebranded. We made this massive rebrand. Instead of the Well Florence, we are now the Well Church Florence. So
Okay.
we we stepped out big time there.
Yeah.
And so the conversations with John, I think a lot of what we had built just in trust in me, one, I think sometimes it's hard to lead from a second or a third chair, right? Because
Yeah.
we want to be in that first chair.
Yep.
I think people ask John and I all the time, how do you guys work so closely together? And the truth is, it's not that hard. I don't want his job and he doesn't want my job. And I trust him to do his and he trusts me to do mine. And I'm not trying to circumvent him to do his work and he's not trying to do that in mine. Right. So there's just a lot of trust.
Yeah.
I really don't know how to say it any other way.
Yeah.
That we built there in those first 4 years that ultimately have been a huge catalyst for us these last 6. And so I would say to a young guy that's in ministry right now and in a collegiate role on a church staff somewhere, man, just keep building that trust with that senior leader, or those senior leaders. And it's not always in the office. It's over lunch, shooting the breeze about college football. It's talking about family. It's asking questions and learning from them and their years of ministry, because John's got scars on his knuckles from things that I haven't had to walk through, but I've learned how to walk through them because he shared with me, those things. And so I think the trust factor is ultimately what allowed for us to even have the conversations. I think the vision of this could be something bigger than University of North Alabama. This could be something bigger than the Well Florence or the Well Church in Florence is ultimately what excited John the most. Of, hey, we could actually get into a situation here where our collegiate work is multiplying across the state and across the Southeast. And we don't know what that looks like, or even we don't have all the answers, but I think that excited him to the extent that he's like, hey, let's risk everything. Let's risk this 14-year-old ministry for the sake of trying to do it in as many places as we can do it. So,
wow. So in Florence and then in Huntsville, did you guys, as far as your college ministry, did you guys go purchase facilities? Or are you like doing, how does that even kind of look for you guys now, like as the Well in Florence, and then as you send out in Huntsville, how are you even kind of posturing that stuff?
Yeah. So in Florence, we leveraged our student organization status for a while and was able to use facilities on campus. Which made it really easy and really helpful in reaching and engaging students. We have since, because of space, moved back to Highland, actually. So Highland has a full gymnasium, and we meet in that gymnasium every Sunday and every Wednesday. So our relationship with Highland is still very much, intact, and we're still very much a part of the larger Highland family in that sense. Huntsville, the reason the timeline got moved up so quickly of our work there is because we had a church contact us. They knew that we were praying about planting in Huntsville, and we had a church called University Baptist Church that was 2 blocks from the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And they contacted us and said, hey, look, we know you guys are praying about this and would love to partner with you in this work. We'll do anything you need us to do. We just don't have the capacity to do the ministry. And we, John and I, had multiple conversations with their pastor. His name is Dr. Bobby Burt. And Dr. Burt is one of the most humble leaders I think I've ever come in contact with in my life. And, when people say that, you're like, yeah, okay. But like, at what point does this hospitality run out,
Yeah.
And we're multiple years in now. That was 2016. So we're 4 years into that friendship and that relationship and ministry partnership with Bobby and university. And we still haven't found the end of their hospitality, man. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, we started the work in partnership with University Baptist, just trying to lay some groundwork for a future planter to come in 16. And when Ethan McCreary came on our team and planted in the fall of 17, they were looking for a place to meet. And Bobby said, "Why are you guys even looking? We've already told you we'll do anything you need us to do. So we've got a huge fellowship hall. Why don't you guys just start there?" So Ethan and the team launched in that fellowship hall and eventually outgrew that fellowship hall. And Bobby went to the church and said, "Hey, look, we got this church plant that you guys know and love and been meeting in our building, and they've outgrown the fellowship hall. So we're going to need to vote to move the time of our worship service so that they can have the worship center at 11 o'clock. So they moved their 10:30 worship service that had been that way for, 75 years.
Wow.
They moved it to 8:30 so that the Huntsville could have the worship center at 11. I mean, so like just time and time and time again, they've gone above and beyond to help make that church plant survive and thrive. They gave them office space, so we've officed out of their facilities for a couple of years now, and they haven't charged us a dime, like no rent, no utilities, nothing. They've just like, we believe in this and this is our contribution. And so we've been incredibly blessed facility wise with Florence and with Huntsville.
Man. Wow, what a that doesn't happen everywhere. What a godsend on that, man.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so your next podcast guest needs to be Dr. Bobby Burt in Huntsville. Just talk to him about it.
That. No kidding, man. No kidding. That would be a great conversation. Well, tell us a little bit. So you guys aren't finished. I know that you guys have the Well Church there in Florence. You've got the one in Huntsville. You got the one Church at the Oaks, getting off the ground in Tuscaloosa. Tell us kind of when does this end? What's the vision behind all of this that you guys are kind of bent on to continue to plant churches?
Yeah. So, man, I blame Brian Fry. Like this is all Brian Fry's fault, you know? So about 2 weeks after we put Ethan on the ground in Huntsville in the fall of 17, we all went out to Oakland for a Collegiate Collaborative. And man, we thought, all right, we've bit off more than we can chew. We got 2 of these things in 2 years, and we're trying our best just to get our legs under us and figure it out. And we're sitting in a session. So it's John and I, it's Ethan, who's our planner in Huntsville, and it's a lady on our staff named Kelly. She's with us as well. So we're in a group, and we're asked, how many churches do you think you can plant in the next 10 years? And we're like, we got no idea. We're just trying to plant these 2, we're trying to figure this out. And so we write down, all right, so if we just plant every 3 years, what does that look like? We just kind of followed the math, and the number was 16, right? So we're like, all right, so I think it was Jonathan Yarbrough that was actually leading our session at the time. He says, all right, now add a 0 to that. And we're like, 160 churches in 10 years? Like, this is ridiculous. There's no way. Yeah. He's like, I want you to figure out how to do that. So we spent the next, hour figuring out how we would attempt to do that. and then he came back. He's like, all right, now take the 0 away. You just figured out how to plant your original number. And we're like, oh, we only have to plant 16 churches in the next 10 years. We can do this. It's like this mind game that they play with you out there. So, but the Lord did something in that conversation. We're like, all right, maybe we have been so focused on here that we're missing something the Lord's calling us to on a larger scale. And on the plane ride home, we just started doing research and putting the pieces in place. We're like, all right, Lord, I mean, if you're calling us to plant in, university cities across the Southeast, starting in Alabama, then we're for it. Because we're seeing our friends in the Northwest with Resonate. We're seeing our friends in the Midwest, with H2O and Cornerstone and certainly stuff with you guys. We're beginning there in Texas. And we're like, all right, but maybe we're in a strategic spot because we're the only ones we know of right here in the Southeast. Yep. And maybe it's on us. And, at least to start something here. So we set out, from that point, kind of running after this idea of planting 16 by 2026. And But for COVID slowing us down a little bit, we're currently on pace to make that happen.
Man, that's incredible, man. And I think you're right, and you look at, you have Resonate, Pacific Northwest, Cornerstone, Midwest. I know Redeemer's really taking the mantle, I think, on some of the Southwest, and you guys in the Southeast, and H2O, of course, kind of in the Midwest as well. The Lord seems to really be stirring a lot in churches to kind of combine this church planting, college ministry, multiplication movement type of thinking, and it's really super exciting to see. I just think college students are I really believe, as Steve Lutz said, they're the most strategic mission field for us to really leverage everything that we have in order to reach, develop, and deploy them. And I think it's if we want to change trajectories, I think it's the number one place for us to start. I mean, next gen ministry in general, but I really think with, you have with a college student, just such a unique period of time where they're out from underneath the umbrella of, these different kind of authorities in their life. I mean, I know their parents are still authority in life, but they're kind of making their own decisions. They're launching out into the world. And so why not leverage this and strategically create churches and networks that will help, just continue to advance the gospel. So, man, really love what you guys are doing. Obviously, you said, you guys are doing 16 by 26. Is that correct?
That's right.
And so that's kind of really the answer to this next question. But what else do you hope, like in the next 10 years, man, what would you hope to see happen through all of this? I know you want those churches planted, but what else would you love to see happen in the next 10 years?
Yeah. So from our standpoint, I hope we look back at 2030 and go, man, our vision was just way too small.
Yeah.
I think I look back to 2015 and go, we didn't know what we didn't know. And I know that, we'll look back in 10 years and do the same thing here. And frankly, just, hope that we're seeing true multiplication of churches at that point in time in the third and fourth generation. Beyond that, I think, my heartbeat, because I'm a Southerner by birth,
Yep.
I was born here in Alabama. I know that we've got over 3,000 Southern Baptist churches in this state. I know we've got 350,000 college students in this state. And I know that there's less than 20 full-time college ministers in those churches.
Yeah.
The majority of them are in Tuscaloosa and Auburn. And there's a lot of just still unengaged campuses that It's not my vision that the Well Church would be the only thing, or the Well Church Network would be the only planting network in Alabama planting on these campuses. Yeah. I want to see those other 3,000 churches, many of whom are totally capable of planting and engaging the campus in really significant ways. I want to see them wake up to the mission field in their backyard.
Yeah.
I want to see them realize what you just stated, right? The strategic nature of that mission field. I feel like in every conversation I have with someone who's outside of collegiate work, they go, well, college students just don't give back. And Mitch, you and I both know it's just, they may not give back in traditional ways, but they give back in ways that are way more significant for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And even in those traditional ways, right, through finances and things of that nature, the Lord has proven to us here that when you teach them to do that, they do it. They just don't know they need to do it. And so it's been, I think for me, my biggest prayer the next 10 years is that the Lord does something in the hearts of these other, more traditional churches to recognize that, and begin to plant churches out of those congregations. And, nationally, I think, as we just talked about, we see these little movements that got us kind of doing things across the nation through collegiate church planting right now, that I think we're still on the forefront of really seeing what he's going to do. I think there comes a day where I'm praying for a day in which real revival returns, and it starts on these campuses as it normally has. And I just pray that we're a small piece of it, in a much larger puzzle. And by 2030, if the Lord deems that it's right and appropriate to do that, man, I'm going to be about it. And so I'm going to be celebrating here in our little corner of North Alabama to just have a small piece in it.
I love it, dude. Well, you've got the third one church in the network coming, here in Tuscaloosa. Have you guys mapped out where you're going for that fourth one?
Yeah, so we've got we've got quite a few places that we certainly know are places of more need than others in our state. We've kind of learned that the planter makes a pretty significant determination of what place that they go to, just based on their calling and the way that they're cut out. Because all of our campuses, especially some of our smaller campuses, I should say, are more specialized in their degree options, which brings a specific type of student into those campuses. And so we want to do our best to try to partner and pair the planter with the campus in a way in which is going to work in the best way possible.
Gotcha.
We were actually planning to be planting in Troy, down in kind of the southeastern portion of our state right now. And when we brought Britton on, it just made a lot more sense for him to be in Tuscaloosa. And so that's why we're currently planting Church of the Oaks there in Tuscaloosa,
Gotcha.
instead of down in Troy. And so, we've got about, I guess, the other 13 kind of mapped out in general, and have some baseline data on all of them to kind of understand what's going on and make sure that the need that we think is there is actually there. And then from there, we're starting to put together kind of planting prospectuses for each of those as we move forward. So,
Gotcha, man. Well, I think somewhere on that list needs to be Auburn and just launching Hickory Dickory Park.
There you go, man.
Where it all
began.
Where it all began.
Yeah, that's it, man.
That's great.
That's it.
Well, one more thing here. Man, what advice would you give maybe a young college minister that, maybe is exploring the idea of planning, or maybe even if it's a college student or a collegiate leader that wants to be a part of a church planning team? What kind of advice would you give them to explore that a little bit more and kind of figure out, hey, is God leading me towards this?
Yeah. So I think, when we talk to potential planners here and have conversations with folks that frankly, aren't even in our network, kind of outside, just asking similar questions.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like all of our conversations go back to some non-negotiables in planting, and we talk about them in the sense of calling, character, and competency. And so that calling piece in planting, whether you're on a team, just as part of a launch team or the actual planter, I feel like it's the biggest non-negotiable, because with that calling comes conviction. And you and I both know it doesn't matter what ministry, what specific area of ministry you're in. It's tough. Ministry's hard.
Yeah. And
if you're not called to plant churches, you won't plant them long. I mean, it's just because it's a unique toughness in ministry. There's a unique level of difficulty there, starting something from nothing, especially, for somebody coming out of a church-based role to plant a church. You've had support staff and you've had people you just go to and be like, hey, this is what's going on, and it's awful. And they could understand, and when you leave that environment and you are the staff, and you have a small team and you got to lead them and encourage them and keep them going, while at the same time, walking through difficulty on your own, it can be incredibly isolating, and it can be incredibly tough and difficult. Mm-hmm. And it's just hard to take leaps of faith when there is no conviction and true calling. And so I always start there. Like, you've got to be called into this. It's not something you're like, oh, this would be cool. This would be a great stepping stone. Like, church planning isn't a stepping stone job. If it's not something you're ready to give your life for and literally bury your bones in it, then I would encourage you to not jump into it unless that's where you think the Lord's calling you. Because I've had too many friends just kind of get chewed up, in it and spit out just because it's that level of difficulty. Yeah. The second thing we always talk about is character. So you have to be who you're leading people to be. Yeah. And so before you make that leap, you've got to know that I'm as mature and disciplined in my faith as I can absolutely be. That's disciplined and faithful in your relationship to the Lord, and it's disciplined and faithful in your relationship to your family, because we can be workaholics and work, and our family life just be, going to pot, because we're not actually resting and truly investing in the ministry that we have at home. Yeah. And so, I personally, we just finished preaching through 1 John here, and the Lord's just rocked my world with this truth of, over and over again in 1 John, we see that what we do in our lives is a reflection of what we believe about God. Just time and time and time again. And so that character piece ultimately reveals to us what we truly believe about God and what we believe about ourselves. Like, do I believe that I'm the one building this church? Because if so, it's only going to go as far as I can take it. Or do I believe God's going to build his church, and I've just got to be faithful to do what I can do today and know that there's going to be work tomorrow, because I got to leave it here and go love on my family well. And then the last one is competency, which you and I, as we talked about earlier, it just comes with reps. It's hard work. You're building from the ground up. You need a completely different skill set to build it, and a completely opposite skill set to keep it going, right? And keep building it beyond that. And so for somebody thinking about planting, I would say, hey, find those areas in pastoral ministry where you're weakest, and then find people that are really good at those areas and just sit down with them over lunch and have conversations and ask questions. And I would say, look, think about things like, how good are you at building systems and maintaining those systems and processes and building pipelines to get from one end to the other? And if you're not good at those things, find people that are, and let them help you. How good are you at managing personnel? Because there's no admin team anymore to do that for you. It's on you to do that now. And that's a different skill set. How good are you at casting vision? Because it's all you're going to do for the first couple of years is cast vision. You can't fundraise if you can't cast vision, and so get better at those things when you don't have to do them, so that, when the Lord does open that door for you to step out and plant, you're now prepared, as and we're never really prepared, but you're as prepared as you can be, certainly. And so I think that's why residencies are so important, right? Because it gives you a little more freedom and a little more leeway to learn those competencies that maybe otherwise that you just don't have the opportunity to do.
Yeah, man. Well, great stuff, Allen. I appreciate, your time today, just the wisdom on, just hearing your story of just kind of stepping out in faithfulness to take the job, and then just to create, working to create a network of churches that are reaching college students. Very inspirational, and just super excited to see the future of what God's going to build there in Alabama and in the Southeast. But, thanks for being on.
Yeah, Mitch, man, thank you so much. I appreciate you and appreciate your work and your friendship, man. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, dude, glad to have you on. And guys, thanks for joining the podcast today. This is the Roundup Podcast, just putting out content to help you reach, develop, and send college students all over the globe. If you can, we'd love for you to follow us on social media at SBTC Collegiate. That's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Like our podcast, subscribe to it, review it. We'd love to know your thoughts. And if you're out there doing ministry alone, we'd love to include you into our Roundup network. It's just a network of churches that are actively engaging college students. We have a Facebook group called Roundup Network. Just jump in there, join that. You can idea share, collaborate. It's a really good time. But thanks for being on with us today, and we will see you next time.